All right, very, very good. Let me ask this question. What do you hope readers, particularly older adults, take away from your book, your memoir? What's the message you think? Or what do you hope?
Well, one of the interesting things about writing a memoir, and I would not say I'm an expert at it. It was eerie for me when the book came out. It was the number one Amazon bestseller in
Mhm.
the category of psychologist biographies, and it just sort of lit up. Um, and then a lot of people started writing me notes about it and what they appreciated or what they liked or what moved them or what they didn't understand about me until they read it. And what do I want people to get out of it? First, I think that I'll say three things. One, that I share a lot of my internal life.
Mhm.
I'm not a major public figure, but after having written 19 books and given talks to 2.5 million people, and
True.
I have advised companies and governments all over the world, people know that version of me. I felt that the time had come to share the internal version of me, my hopes, my fears, my
Mhm.
terrors, what excites me in life, what makes me sad, struggles I went through when I had some failures in my companies.
Mhm.
Um, so, number one, the idea that we as humans and we as men are not supposed to just be perfect, but rather we've got our vulnerabilities and our strengths that find a way to come together.
Mhm.
That's one thing. Another thing is the serendipity of life. For example, I initially went to school to be a physicist and then took a course in my junior year of college in the psychology of human potential. And before I knew it, I was captivated by this idea of human potential, that each of us had enormous capabilities, most of which were left untouched in our lives.
Mhm.
And I dropped out and moved to Esalen Institute in Big Sur, which most people don't realize
Yeah.
I had done. And I uh, I thought I was going to stay in Big Sur for life. I loved it there. I had a little cabin. I had a multi-hour yoga practice. I was writing my first book, Body Mind, um, leading workshops at Esalen Institute when I was only 22. And then when I was 24, I lived in a cabin behind a locked gate on a private property. It's $150 a month. It was just a dumpy little cabin. A guy's at the front door of my cabin, 5:30 in the morning. Turns out it was a landlord, my landlord, who I had never met, who had been living in New Zealand, and he was a crazy loon of a guy. He
Mhm.
told me he wanted me out of the cabin. He was taking it back, and I said, "Well, I still have a year on my lease." And he pulled out a gun from his
Huh.
vest, put
Hmm.
it to my head, and told me I needed to be out of there. And why don't I get out of Big Sur by sunrise?
Ay, ay.
So one thing led to another, and before you knew it, I reached out to a friend who reached out to a friend, and I moved to Berkeley in a hurry. And we put together the Holistic Health Council, first one ever. And then we launched a project focused on teaching older men and women how to, in a way, improve their well-being and their flexibility, and using a lot of the human potential techniques like biofeedback and yoga and meditation and such, things that are popular now, but back then was way out. And
Mhm.
51 years later, I'm still working in the aging field. So because I became captivated by older people, I became captivated by their perspective. I became troubled by the fact that we were so youth oriented in our modern culture that we weren't fully embracing and respecting what older people had to say and share and the wisdom that many had accumulated. And it's not lost on me that if Jan Brewer had not pulled a gun out and put it to my head, I don't
Yeah.
know what I'd be doing. I could still be living a Big Sur. So life serves up surprises. Sometimes they're unpleasant, but one door closes, another door opens, and
Yeah.
so that's another theme. And the third theme, the final that I'll mention, is I think there's value in all of us leaving some sort of a legacy, as your readers and listeners and past their 50th or 60th or 70th or 80th birthday. Not a bad idea to sit down with a child or a grandchild or a friend and have them turn on the tape recorder and the recorder on their phone maybe. And at the end of Radical Curiosity, I have a list of the questions that ought to be asked. So I guess I'm a big proponent, and the book is meant to stimulate people to think about gathering their own life lessons.
If you had one message to leave for future generations about aging and living a meaningful life, what would it be?
One lesson. I can only boil it down to three.
Mhm.
Does that be okay?
Yeah.
I'll be brief on them.
Okay.
First of all, take really good care of your body.
Okay.
And that can't start when you're 78 for ideal outcomes. It should start when you're a teenager. We ought to be teaching the basics of how to age well to high school kids. Um, take care of your body. Number two, studies I've done now all over the world. I've done studies in 20 countries where we've asked elders what's the most important ingredient in aging well. And it doesn't matter what country we're asking. Could be Russia, could be Mexico, the United States, could be Germany. They all have the same answer. It's the quality of your relationships, people you love and who love you back.
Mhm.
Don't need to be 1,000 of them, but relationships matter more than things. And third, um, be willing to continue to reinvent yourself to find new purpose in your later years. I see, for the last decade, the average American retiree watched 47 hours of television a week. And I don't think that's the point of it. I don't think the point is to see how many decades we can spend through passive media consumption. I think that there's, back to my human potential roots, I think that there's vast opportunities for older adults to be our mentors, our teachers, our
Mhm.
volunteers, fellow students, housemates, leaders, elders.
Yeah.
And I that's a lesson that I think it's important that we all put more front and center.
Mhm.
I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned in the book, a few years ago I was giving a speech and the other presenter was Harrison Ford. And famous actor, he's in his 80s now, he's very busy doing cool things, and he's also a climate activist. So at the end of his speech, he kind of set a rousing challenge to the crowd. We got to get all the kids in the world planting trees, save the planet. And he got a standing ovation. And I had a private meeting with him afterward.
Mhm.
And after I fawned over him and told him how much, I had appreciated all the roles he had played in his life, was still playing. I said, "Are you aware that there's 1 billion people in the world over the age of 60 and nobody has tasked them with anything?" And he paused for a really long time. And he said, "Ken, I've never thought of that." And I think most of us haven't thought of that. We think of older people as being done,
Yeah.
as being, time to move them off to the sidelines. And I'm not saying you turn 60 or 80, you're supposed to have a full-time volunteer job, but some more contribution from our older men and women, some more purposeful roles, I think would be a really major sociologic improvement. I'm 75. I'm still working. And I don't work as many hours. I take a lot more time to work out and enjoy my wife. And we
Yeah.
just planned a few trips we're going to take in the fall.
Mhm.
And about half of the work I do, I don't. expect to get paid.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my version of volunteerism, pro bono work, helping young people, mentoring tomorrow's leaders, guiding some organizations. I get a lot of nourishment and satisfaction from doing that. And I'm not saying people should do what I do, but I am finding my own way in this journey too.
Well, I have a good friend, actually, he passed away, Dr. Walter Bortz. He was at Stanford University.
Everybody knows Walter Bortz. Yeah.
Everybody knows him, and he was one of my mentors. And he actually wrote a column for my magazine at that particular time. So I got to know him very well. And I asked him the same question, and he pretty much what said what you did. You know, that basically he has to have a purpose to get up in the morning. You know, he had to have some reason. And to him, he still had a reason. And of course, you know, he wrote a lot of books, not as many as you, by the way, but he wrote about 7 or 8 books, and one of them was Dare to Be at 100. And he passed away at 94. So he didn't make that, you know, but he was very inspiring, you know, and sort of like yourself, you know. So I do understand the purpose, you know, of if we don't have a purpose, you can't go on vacation all the time, my God. Okay. Or play golf or, you know, or read books or whatever, you know, you got to have a purpose to keep going. I wanted to kind of switch over a little bit to caregiving, just to bring you up to speed. As I get older and my friends get older, you know, I get a lot of comments about, hey, Larry, what do I do? You know, my mom or my dad, you know, is getting older, needs some help. I can see the signs of aging. Where do I go? Who do I contact? And to the research that I did among my friends is that they really didn't have an answer. You know, of course, everybody says, well, you know, go to a home care provider. Well, that's one, but is that the only resource out there for older adults? So I'm working on this. I don't want to call it a book. I think it's more of just a resource guide that I'm working on right now to help answer some of those questions, you know, about, hey, when somebody needs help, where do you go? What do you do? And that's why I wanted to talk to you too, because, you know, your background is quite extensive and you've had experience yourself with your own parents,
Right.
you know, and you probably have a lot of friends, you know, who have needed help as they get older. So anyway, that was the idea that I have. So I'm talking to a lot of different people. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you. We are very friendly on, you know, and one of the things that I have seen is technology. I wanted to ask you is how do you see technology, you know, transforming the caregiving landscape today? You know, how is that going to really help? And is that really the future and the answer, you know, to caregiving, which is a very complex, very hard, very expensive, you know?
Yeah, let me first of all, bravo to you for doing this. We just published a study that we advised Edward Jones, the financial firm, on that about half the American adult population have been or are currently caregivers. That's a big number.
Yeah.
And it's partly because moms and dads and spouses and brothers and sisters are living longer. It's also because we don't do a terribly good job of aging with health.
Mhm.
There's a concept of lifespan, how long we live. We're 42nd in the world. Excuse me, we're 49th in the world. And then there's health span. How many of those years do we live with health and
Mhm.
ability to function independently? And we only rank 72nd in the world. And we spend more money on healthcare than any other country in the world. So we're obviously not doing a great job creating healthy longevity. Partly what that means is that people spend the last, on average, 12 years of their life in a cascade of problems. And we don't really have the institutions or the knowledge or the expertise in place so that people know who to go to for guidance. And that phone rings and mom just fell down and broke her hip, or
Yeah.
your spouse, someone you love, has been diagnosed with a condition, who do you talk to? And it used to be primary care physicians, but a lot of people do not have a primary care physician. Or maybe it's a home care agency. Then that's what they're gonna, when you think you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. They're gonna try to guide you in that direction. There are some financial firms like Edward Jones that are training their advisors to be able to talk with people about what the choices are and what the steps are that you might need to take. But we're in the early stages of that kind of thing. I have an article coming out in July in the Harvard Business Review, and this one is really going to make you stop and think for a second. Last year, more American workers were providing elder care than child care.
Mm,
So employers could be useful. In our HR department, we have an expert on caregiving. Talk to them. They can guide you in the right directions. And we might make some more leave time for you. And keep in mind, too, that if people are working and they're caregivers, they're probably more senior in their careers than someone who might have been providing childcare. Childcare provider might be in their 20s or 30s, maybe early 40s. An elder care provider might be in their 40s or 50s or 60s. They might be your senior vice president.
mhm,
And to have them leave work every Wednesday afternoon to care for mom is very costly. Um, so rethinking the whole phenomenon of caregiving and providing either websites or, and I'll get back to AI technology, or individuals who are skilled and trained in knowing how to guide you. Keep in
mhm,
mind that the average person over 65, 30% of them have five or more doctors that they see each year. And those doctors often don't talk to each other.
mhm,
So there are times where people are getting their medications interacting, or one doctor is not aware of what another doctor is treating. And so it can get very chaotic. Um, I personally am skeptical about a lot of the AI because it seems to be moving so fast, and I'm not sure the people who are spearheading it are thinking about how to make life better for humans.
mhm.
There's so much talk about who's the latest billionaire versus how many people's lives are being helped or saved or benefited. But there is no question in my mind that some sort of a, let's call it like a health Waze, just like when Waze came along, that could help direct you for how to get from here to there, bearing in mind traffic and other factors on the road. Um, if we could have our biometrics coordinated by AI and then receive guidance about the most effective caregiving steps to take and who to take them with, people would feel a greater sense of security that they were doing the right thing. And I do think that AI could play a very meaningful role because there's not a lot of other people, the average priest or minister or rabbi or psychotherapist, are not that expert. I was mentored when I was in my 20s by a gentleman named Eric Erickson, who was considered the great father of adult development. Eric and his wife Joan were friends. And he wrote a book, Childhood and Society, and in it he covers the 8 stages of life that people will be migrating through. But five of them were childhood. So we do not have good maps in place yet about maturity. And, there are role models and extraordinary examples like yourself that are emerging. And, but these discussions and these blueprints need further work. And caregiving is going to be a major factor in the years to come.
Yeah. A couple other questions. I want to let you go. I know one other thing as I go through my notes here. So hang on one second.
No rush.
If you could offer one advice for someone who is caring for someone, what would it be?
One of the most interesting things that has emerged from the studies we've done over the years about caregivers is this sort of paradox that, on the one hand, people clearly view it as a disruption, as a distraction. It's
Mhm,
stressful, it's painful, it's emotional. And 25% of caregivers have to leave their jobs because the caregiving has become so demanding and it's costly.
mhm.
But in the same studies, we hear caregivers saying it was the most honorable thing they've ever done in this life, or brought them closer to the individual than they had ever been before, or they feel grateful for having been given the chance to return some love. And so, one advice is that keep your head high, recognize that what you're doing is kind of honorable and beautiful. And in a world where there's so much focus on oneself and what can I do for me, to give of yourself for another person is spiritual and beautiful in its own right.
Okay, Ken, I don't want to take any more of your valuable time, but I really appreciate, you sharing your thoughts about caregiving and, life in general. And I think it's motivating for a lot of people. So I want to thank you. And you mentioned that you have been recording this. Is there any way that I could
I
get a
will,
link to
I
that?
will, it'll download when we're done and then I'll send it over to you.
I appreciate that very much. And
Guys,
be
can I say,
well.
let me say one other thing
Sure.
that I'm thinking about. There's a lot, I hear it from my kids. There's a lot of feeling that if you're young today, 20s, 30s, 40s, there's no value in sort of back in the day, you got to deal with what's now and what's current. And I would say that if I were taking a camping trip that was an important one, and there were people returning from the direction that I was heading in, wouldn't be a bad idea to ask them, hey, what's up ahead?
Hmm.
Are there any danger zones, any rattlesnakes?
Yeah.
On the other hand, where's the fresh water? And are there some beautiful sunsets to be seen? And I think that the the challenge of growing up in these modern times is to both live in the now, but also wherever possible, take some guidance and some perspective from people who have been down the trail before.
Well, you definitely have done your share and still doing your share of motivating people and explaining, the whole aging process. So I want to thank you for all your good work and
Thank
continue
you,
doing
Larry.
it. You and Maddie are doing a great job. And thank you very much. And be well and take care of yourself.
Thank you. Do you want me to get this transcribed or will you take care of that?
Pardon?
Do you want me to get this recording transcribed or will you take care of that?
Could you do that? That would be a
Yeah,
big help.
I have a woman who does our transcribing and she's quick. So let me see if I'll send you the recording, but I'll also send her a request to transcribe it.
Well, fantastic. I appreciate all your help. Hang in
Thanks,
there.
Larry. Good luck to you.
You too. Bye bye.